our lesson, guys. Today we'll be looking at testing a class, tracing objects, and object references. And we'll also have a brief look at static variables and static methods. Okay, so let's begin. So, firstly, we have a class called the sandwich class. We can see this on line number 13, public class sandwich. This class will be responsible for defining what a sandwich is, what details it has, e.g., the attributes, and what methods it has, e.g., the functions. Okay, so if we begin at the top of the class on line number 15, we have defined three instance variables. Now, an instance variable is essentially attached to each instance of the class. So for every sandwich from this class, there will be these three instance variables. So we will have a main ingredient, which is a string of type chicken, which will be the alif daradi, the default value. On line number 16, we have each sandwich will be made from bread, and each sandwich will have a price. The default values for bread currently exist at null. The default value for price currently exists at 0.0. We move down. On line number 19, we have what we know as a class variable. Now, a class variable simply means that it's related to the whole class rather than each instance of the class. So if you can imagine, within a classroom setting, you have students. Each student has a name, so that's an instance variable. A class variable would be what school do those students go to, because they all go to the same school. So the class variable is attached to the whole class. Okay, sometimes the class variable will be fixed, like the school name. Sometimes the class variable will be something that changes, like number of students within the class. And this is like a counter which will tell you how many sandwiches the class sandwich has produced. So if you noticed, we have the static keyword at the beginning. This is what allows it to be a class variable. Moving down, we have our constructors. Now, a constructor is essentially the building component for each object. So when we build an object, we need to use a constructor call. Okay, if we use a zero parameter one, and you know that this is a zero parameter constructor simply because there are no arguments within the parameters. Okay, so that's a zero parameter constructor. Now, within the zero parameter constructor, we have defined the key instance variables as main ingredient chicken, which is kind of double entry, so perhaps we could delete that. Okay, and we've said that the bread is equal to wheat. We've said that the price is equal to 10.0, and we have a sandwich counter here. So each time we produce a new object from the sandwich class, the sandwich counter will go up by 1. So currently it's at 0, but the minute we use a zero parameter constructor, it will increase by 1. So that means all the sandwiches, now we have 1 if we've made one sandwich. Now, if we look below, we have another constructor. Okay, on line 29. So this is another constructor. When you have more than one constructor, we define this as an overloaded constructor, which simply means that we have more than one. Now, if we look at this, things to note about the constructor that I didn't say at the beginning. Constructors always begin with public because they need to be accessible. Okay, we have the name, and it's the same name as the class, sandwich, sandwich. And also you will note there is no return type. If you look at the method below on line 36, you will notice that there's a return type. Okay, even though the return type is void, which means non-returning, it still has a return type. But constructors do not have a return type. Now, if we look at more detail at this constructor, you will note we are simply assigning our instance variables with the values and our class variable. So we say string main ingredient. Okay, so that's the first argument as a parameter. So whatever is given as main ingredient will be given to the object. Then we have string B, which will be given to bread, and double P, which will be given to price. So essentially the user will come and define each of these items, and then they will be given to the instance variable, or in the case of the static variable below, given to the static variable. Now, if you notice on line 30, I've used a different format to what I did on line 31. If the variable, the instance variable, is the same name as the local variable, that is the variable that is given in the parameter, we need to use this to distinguish it. Otherwise, it will never get passed to the object, being the sandwich. It will stay in the constructor, and when the constructor finishes running, it will essentially disappear and go to the garbage collector, which is a Java utility. Again, our sandwich count increases every time we create a new sandwich object. So these are our two constructors. These are instance variables. This is our class variable on line 19. Moving down, we have our methods. You should be familiar with these methods. We have three methods, which are set methods. We have three methods, which are get methods. And we have a sandwich count return, which is also a type of get method because we're returning the value. Now, if we look at our set methods, you will notice that these are called mutator methods. Okay, why? Because mutator methods actually change the value of a instance variable. Okay, or in the case of the class variable below, a class variable perhaps. So they receive an argument, okay, and we have to define the argument giving a type, in the case here, a string, and then we give it a name and we say this is the new value. What is the purpose, you're probably thinking, of using a mutator method, or otherwise known as a set method? The point is, sometimes we need to change the value. Maybe somebody ordered a chicken sandwich and then decided to change their mind and decided to have a cheese sandwich, for example. So in that case, we would insert the string cheese, okay, and it would take that value and it would give it to the object. And you can see we've used a this reference in again, which is specific. So we're saying explicitly that we are connecting the value to the instance variable of the object. So moving down, lines 40 to 42 and so on, these other set methods follow the same format, and it's very similar to the constructor, you will notice, okay? Just a quick rundown of the set method again. We start off with public because we want it to be potentially accessible from other classes. Void because we are committing an action here. So the set method is an action, the changing action, changing a value. And we give it an appropriate name, set main ingredient, or I've done MI for short. Okay, and in the parameters, we receive the argument, which is a string, and then we simply below on line 37 say MI, which is received, give it to the main ingredient, and then our job is done. Same situation with our set bread, same situation with our set price. Now below, we have our get methods. I'll start with the standard get method on line 52. With a get method, we simply say public, what item are we returning? What type of item? So in the case of main ingredient is defined as a string. So we are returning a string. So public string get MI, okay? No parameters because we are receiving nothing, we're giving something in fact. Okay, and in the curly braces, we say return main ingredient because essentially the user wants to find out something about that main ingredient. What is the main ingredient? So this is maybe we use it for printing purposes when we want to find out more about our object. So these are our get methods. Public string get MI. So the return type is string, and in fact it's string also for bread. For the price being a double, okay, because it has let's say, I don't know, 50.10, so $50.10 perhaps. Obviously not going to be the price of your sandwich, a bit expensive. Okay, looking at our final get method here, public static int get sandwich. So this is returning the sandwich count, and you notice because it's a static variable that we're working with, we have to also insert static in the method header. So public static int get sandwich count. So anytime we are defining a static method, we have to, or a class method, we have to use static in the header also, and that will allow us to access the static variable. And what do we say? Return sandwich dot sandwich count. So because it's a class variable, it's attached to the whole sandwich class, so we're returning sandwiches dot sandwich count rather than attaching a instance before we attach the whole class to it, because that variable represents the whole class. So this is the class of sandwich, and essentially it's the description. If we want to test the class of sandwich, we need to now add a main method. Okay, so what we've got here is class test sandwich. Now, how do I know that this is a test class? Not because of the title, but because of the fact that we have a main method here. So we have class test sandwich, okay, public static void main string args. Okay, so this essentially, this line here tells me that this is a test class because this is the first instruction that goes to the compiler, and all of these items below. Okay, so we'll just put a note here, main method. Okay, and this again, I'll repeat, tells me that this is a test class, not the title, although the title is an indicator. All right, and I've got my 4 objects here. Okay, and these 4 objects are defined using instantiation. Okay, and if you notice, instantiation essentially is us calling the constructors. So we've got this constructor here, the sandwich constructor, and this constructor here, our second overloaded constructor. Now, if you look at the similarities, you will notice that the first one is using the 0 parameter call. Okay, so 0 parameter. Okay, I can't spell clearly. The 0 parameter call. The one below, or the 3 below, are using the 3 parameter option, which is the overloaded constructor. Okay, the overloaded constructor. And if you check, you can actually make sure that these arguments are correct, because the first 2 should be strings, string, string, and the final argument is a double. Okay, double. Now, if these arguments do not conform to string, string, double, you will find that our system will give it an error. So if I get rid of that 20, it will say, hold up, you've got an error here. Although I could potentially write 20. Okay, now this is an integer, but an integer can fit into a double, but a double cannot fit into an integer. So an integer is acceptable in this place here, and a double also, because it's defined as a double. Okay, so you would note that the arguments have to follow our predefined arguments, the same order and the same number. Okay, so either no arguments or 3 arguments following the specific order. So we've got 3 sandwiches here, or 4 sandwiches, sorry. The first sandwich, can anyone tell me what are our ingredients? Tick tock tick. Let's trace. 0 parameter, 0 parameter. Main ingredient equals chicken. Bread equals wheat. Price equals 10. And our count is increased. So our first sandwich will have those values. And maybe this is the most popular sandwich that we sell, and that's why we've predefined it. Our 3 following sandwiches are tuna, chocolate, cheese, etc. And you can see all the details here. Sometimes we need to change values, as we said. So we're using a set price method, and again, it follows the same format. Set price, it receives 1 argument, okay, which is a double, $4.99. And maybe we've decided to do a discount, okay, because we're feeling charitable and we want to give our sandwich away at a lower price. It was originally how much? 10, okay, but now we're saying it's gone to $4.99. Hey, it's sales. And here we've got our print statements. We're using our get methods. We have to put the object in front. So object 1, in the case of the first one, dot get b, okay, and we are simply returning the type of bread is, so that's a string literal, and then we attach the variable that is relative to object 1. Okay, so when we use a method, or we're calling a method, we need to attach the variables. Okay, so do you think you could produce this for our other sandwiches following the same format? That's a question for you, a little challenge. Okay, down below we have our sandwich count. Now with the sandwich count, we could actually simply say, we could potentially get rid of that because it's a static method. The only difficulty is we are in the test sandwich class here. So we actually need to say, okay, who is this get sandwich count method related to? Is it related to an instance or the class? It's related to the class, so we put the class itself. Okay, and that's it. Now if we run our code, what's your expectation? this is the outcome. We've printed the type of bread is wheat. The main ingredient is chicken. The price is $4.99. And how many sandwiches have we made? 4. And that's it, guys. I hope that was useful for you. So that was essentially testing in class, tracing objects with our static method and static variable. Okay, and a little bit about object references here, because these are our essentially reference variables or our object references. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more. Any questions, please send me a message or just review the video. Hope you enjoyed it.